All set? All right, we're going to begin with a chalice lighting. I've asked Dia Pavel, one of the Board of Trustees members, to light the chalice while I do the reading. This is our congregational covenant that we're test driving this year. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its practice. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth and justice in love, and to work toward the time and place where everyone's worth and dignity are honored by all in our world's beloved community. Thanks for joining us today, folks. My name is John Gerber. I'm one of the co-presidents of the Board of Trustees, along with Ann Moore. We've been working on some projects, so we want to, with the Green Sanctuaries Committee and the Meetinghouse Committee and the Finance Committee, and we'd just like to tell you a little about what's going on. As you know, last spring, you approved the expenditure to do the siding. The siding is getting close to being done. It should be done by the end of the month. Suzanne Personette has been our liaison between the board and Wright Builders, and she's been doing a great job monitoring and keeping us informed. A couple of things that we were pleased with was we were able to save the shrubbery out front. We weren't so sure about that. And thanks to Janice Gray, our dear angel window is protected by plywood because she monitors that very closely. So we're really pleased about that. What we're going to do today is a couple of things. We'll begin with an update on how the siding project is being paid for. Helen Blatz will be on Zoom, and so Emma's going to get her on Zoom here in a minute, and we'll hear some of the financing. You approved the expenditure. We weren't sure how the financing was going to work out by last spring, and so Helen was really helpful in getting us sort through the various options and work through that. And some people have had some questions about it, so we want to make that clear. We're going to have an update from Ron Grossline on his recommendations from the Meetinghouse Committee, from Jeff Clark on recommendations from the Green Sanctuaries Committee, and then Peter Lacey on how we hope to pay for this if we move forward. Today is not a vote. Today is not, we don't have a need for a quorum. This is about information, about sharing what's going on, what we're thinking about, to encourage your questions and feedback from folks. If we do move forward, there'll be a congregational meeting and a vote down the line. But right now, we just wanted to give you a heads up about what we're thinking about and what's coming next. But let's start with Helen on Zoom, talk about the financing for the current project, which is almost complete.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about where we are today with financing of our current project. And I will just emphasize that this is relating only to the siding project, okay, that has been approved and so forth. So with that said, we obtained a construction loan from Florence Savings Bank for 80% of the expected cost, like, you know, a mortgage, which is what it is. The bank requires that UUSA have 20% interest in it as well. So a down payment from our reserves was made, and we have a mortgage in the amount of just shy of $174,000. It has not yet been dispersed, and the reason for that is because with a construction loan, they disperse funds as funds need to be dispersed based upon, you know, payment schedules to the builder. So it's a 20-year loan. We also have the option of paying interest only for the first 6 months, which runs from September 3rd of 22 through February 3rd of 23. As of March of 23, it then would amortize or actually have both interest and principal payments over a 20-year period. And so it's 240 monthly payments. And again, these are just hypothetical numbers based upon if we use the entire amount in 6 months, which I expect we will. But you'd be looking at about $1,100 to $1,200 per month as a monthly payment over the next 20 years if we only make the minimum payment. The interest rate is fixed for the first 5 years. It is an adjustable rate mortgage. So for the first 5 years, it's fixed at the rate of 5.34%. Thereafter, after 5 years, it will be adjusted based upon the 2.25% bank margin plus whatever the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston rate is. So again, the way adjustable rate mortgages work is to have the index, which is in this case the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston index, plus the bank's margin, which is how they make money, which is 2.25%. So add those together, that's how we come up with the 5.34% fixed for the first 5 years. There is no prepayment penalty unless we refinance it with another bank, which these are good terms. I see no reason why we would. If anything, the hope is that we can pay it down sooner rather than later. The only time there would be a prepayment penalty is if you refinanced it. But again, if we can pay it off prior to the 20-year term, there's no costs. Monthly payments for the interest only for the first 6 months will be taken directly out of our checking account at Florence Savings Bank. Let's see. The available proceed, we paid the closing costs, which was the attorney fees, title insurance, and we're very fortunate that Florence Bank did not charge a lot of things. They really only charged an origination fee and the mandatory tax service fee and environmental search fee. So they were very good to us. Those closing costs of $4,000, which includes the attorney fees of $1,500, as well as title insurance and the bank fees, was paid from the loan. So it was not an out-of-pocket expense to the society, but as of September, we did make our first interest-only payment on a balance of $4,000. So I have plenty of information. If anyone has any questions, I'll close it there. And I think that in looking back at it, at the time, I had said that it was a lousy time to borrow money. But frankly, everything in life has to do with perspective. As I look at current interest rates on home loans on the residential side being well over 6% at this point, it's really all a matter of perspective. So I think that Florence, as I say, made the process seamless. I'm thankful that they shaved off fees, and I'm hopeful that the congregation will be able to pay this off sooner than later. Are there any questions?
Other questions from the sanctuary? Helen, thank you for being here. We're glad you and Lauren are feeling better.
Thank you.
We appreciate the work that you've done on making this happen. For those of you that are using the mic, you got to put it close to your face. Next, we're going to have Ron Grossline talk about the thinking of the Meetinghouse Committee.
In that case, let's go on to a couple of other matters. You probably noticed that the oak benches, which have been out here and out front, are gone. They suffered some serious rot and were unsafe. They had chunks missing, and we were afraid people would get hurt, so we took them out. The big meeting house sign out front that says Unitarian Meeting House is in poor shape. It's got a lot of rot in it, and it won't last too very much longer. The wayside pulpit is broken and down. So we're thinking on the maintenance committee to roll all that into we're not sure what to call it, a landscaping project. It's more than that, really. But this is coming along, and it's a matter of what do we want those signs to say? Really, do we want the sign to say Unitarian Meeting House, Unitarian Universalist Society of Amherst, on the wayside pulpit the way it's been? There are a lot of questions to consider about what we want to have on those signs, which are beyond the scope of the Meeting House Committee alone. And we're looking for input from the board, from anyone else who wants to weigh in. Ellen Cosmer, a new member of the Meetinghouse Committee, is looking to pull together a group of interested people to start wrestling with some of these problems. Is that all right with you, Ellen? You're muted, Ellen.
Okay. I wanted to gather a very small group of people together first so we can outline all of the issues that are going to be facing us as we look at the exterior plans, the signage, the benches, the whole business. And so we have to outline sort of exactly what the problems are, the questions are, the concerns are, and then obviously ask for information and opinions and help and so forth. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a very important part of what we do as a congregation, and I look forward to working with everybody on, eliciting information and that sort of thing. But we'll try to get a whole list of sort of areas that we want to cover and what some of the issues are, and then get them out to the community at large. I think that would be the best way to sort of handle this at this point. So thank you. And yes, if you have questions or concerns and you want to direct them to me, please do that. And I will we are forming a subcommittee. So any questions, concerns, email them to me. I will bring them to the subcommittee and then we'll sort of go on from there. But thank you.
There you have it. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Are we ready to go on to ventilation? This is maybe the thorniest problem facing the maintenance committee and the society at this point. In response to the COVID epidemic, you probably know, and concern about indoor air quality, particularly viruses, we had a study done to find out what our equipment can do, and what it could do, what it could be upgraded to do. This is the Tighe and Bond study, and it makes difficult reading, and their very off-the-cuff cost estimate was something like $50,000 to bring our ventilation up as good as it can be given what's here already. At the same time, the Green Sanctuary Committee is looking into ways and means of reducing our energy usage here with a aspirational goal of net zero energy usage. We'll see if that's possible. Clearly, we don't want to spend a lot of money on our existing HVAC furnaces and air handling gear, and then tear that out and replace it with something else. We want these two projects to be carefully integrated. And I certainly don't have the expertise to come up with a plan myself, and I don't know if anyone else in this society does. So what we're thinking is to hire an outside expert with a track record of green building and a fair amount of HVAC ventilation expertise to come up with a proposal that we think we can actually do that gets us a good chunk of the way toward where we want to go. And I think maybe the next step here is to hear from the Green Sanctuary Committee, because Jeff has made some progress on finding such a person. So I think at this point, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
So I used to be in marketing, kind of still am, so therefore I can't think, let alone talk without slides. So hopefully, hopefully everybody here can see that, and you know, there's not a ton of detail on this, not a ton of slides, so hang with me as we go through these. So as Ron said, you know, there are a number of us who, and actually you can go to the next slide, because the committee back in, I think it was the spring of 2021, we had a discussion about things that we should be doing to further our impact on how we can avert climate change. And so one of the ideas that came up was to make our own physical building as carbon neutral, so not as net energy zero, but net fossil fuel zero as possible. And so there were things that were done to date. You know, there was insulation work that was done in both the sanctuary and in the new building. There obviously was the PV panels that were put on the roof of the new building, sealed up a lot of leaky holes. And so then the thing is, well, what could we do next? So the two things that we could do next were to replace our furnaces. We have 5 furnaces, and replace them with heat pumps, which operate on electricity, and then add additional solar capacity, so additional PV, so hopefully the additional load from heating the place would also be covered by the solar power. And so it's difficult to be totally carbon neutral because we have a commercial water heating system that feeds the kitchen that is, at least the recommendations we got is at this point it's very difficult to convert that to a heat pump heated water system. And so, so anyway, we did get a number of quotes, and if you want to go to the next slide, the first thing we did is we talked to Sam Pomeroy, who the business is Climates by Pomeroy. They're the HVAC company that is, you know, helped us in the past. And he gave us a number of options. He says, well, you could keep the furnaces and have heat pumps that are basically sit on top of them, use all the existing air handling system, but the heat pumps would work down to a certain, you know, temperature range outside, and then the furnaces would be the backup. The other proposal he gave us was to just totally replace the furnaces and put in the heat pumps. So you're reusing your ductwork and all that, but you're replacing the heating and the air conditioning source so that the heat pumps would do the work. And then the backup would be an electric resistance heat, which adds more power demands, obviously. And the reason we're recommending that we just totally replace the furnaces is because the incentives that are out there, at least the incentives that were there as of this spring, were such that it made as much sense to totally replace them as it to do the sort of the partial solution. And the one caveat there is that there are new incentives coming out. So through the Inflation Reduction Act and other things that the state's doing, there may be even more money that we can knock off the top line. But basically the net cost to replace the 5 furnaces with heat pumps is $36,750. And by the way, all these quotes we got were very provisional. These were not, we said, you know, we don't have the money in hand to go do anything today, so just give us an idea so that we can, like for our capital campaign, we have some numbers to work with. So this means our electrical demand goes up. So if you go to the next slide, the way to solve that is to add photovoltaic panels that would be on the sanctuary roof and also on the roof of the, a little bit on the roof of the entrance. And so roughly to maximize what we could produce, it'd be 64 new panels and at a cost of $94,000, but with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a 30% rebate that the vendor, you know, whether it's Northeast Solar, PV Squared, or any other vendor we work with, that comes off the top. So the cost to us would be $65,800. And it would produce enough we asked them to do a calculation, again, kind of a back of the envelope calculation of, with the electrical demand increasing from the heat pumps, would this amount of solar production, you know, would it cover us? And as you can see, that bottom line is that it would actually be a net, there'd be a net additional production of around 40 or about 5,000 kilowatt hours. So, so likely it would. Can we be sure of that? No, we're not sure. And then obviously there's the issue as you go through the year, you're producing more solar power in the summer, your heat demand is going to be higher in the winter. So, so that's one of the other reasons we think that having an engineer come in and make sure we're not going to get any surprises would be very helpful. So if you go to the next slide, that kind of sums things up. The total potential cost would be around $112,000. Again, these are provisional quotes. And as Ron said, we strongly recommend getting a mechanical engineer to evaluate, what's the additional ventilation going to mean for heating demand? What's the heating demand going to look like when we switch to heat pumps? What's the electric demand going to look like? And so therefore, how's it all balance out for the year? One potential source we may have for help on financing is that there's a company called Phippen Adams Solar. They work with Northeast Solar, and they'll finance the project for nonprofits. So they've worked with the Amherst Survival Center, the Northampton Survival Center, the Audubon Society. So they've done a lot of work, and we've made some initial contact with them, and they're looking at whether they can do projects in 2023, which would be roughly when we would probably get around to doing this. And what they do is they purchase, do the implementation of the system. They own it for 6 years, and they get the tax benefits, et cetera, and then they return the ownership to us at the end of 6 years. So we're on their radar screen, but we haven't really had any serious conversations because, again, they don't know what kind of projects they'll be able to finance in 2023. So anyway, so that kind of covers it. I don't think if there's any questions or if anybody has any additional comments, certainly, Ron's been involved in this. We've had Tom Fricka involved in some discussions. Steve and Perkins we've been talking to the vendors, et cetera. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain them. Okay.
Appreciate it, Jeff, to keep us posted. The Board of Trustees is looking at moving all these projects along in parallel, making sure they communicate with each other and doing it responsibly and making sure you know what we're thinking about. And then there's a price tag to it. And so we've asked Peter Lacey to talk about, so is this possible to fund all of these wonderful projects? Would you, Peter's going to give us all the answers.
The answer is yes. No. I'm Peter Lacey, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about sort of paying for these things.
No, let's listen.
And I'm going to back up to address the question that Carolyn asked a little earlier and get this out of the way. For this current year, we did not budget this. We didn't really know what to budget. And in a lot of ways, it seemed unclear. What we have are two things to get through this current fiscal year, paying for the financing of the project that's going on. We have some reserves that we have them even after having paid our 20% down payment, so to speak, on the project. And we also have some folks who have expressed some interest in, making a down payment, as it were, on the whole larger project. And I believe that between those things, we should have no trouble paying the interest only until March, and then the monthly financing. So I think for the current fiscal year, we should be fine. And you'll be hearing probably more from me about that in the days and weeks ahead. But then there is this large principle for the project, and then all these other projects that you've heard about today, the various different capital expenses. And I think if I'm saying something everybody knows, just shake your head at me and say stop. But By capital expenses, I mean, investments in, acquiring or enhancing or maintaining the actual physical structure of the building. And those we have not typically paid for out of our operating budget, what we pay in pledges, and we really don't have a large amount of money to do that. So to all of these things that we've been mentioning, we are going to be in contact with all of you, the members of the congregation, to gauge your interest and willingness to pay for these things. Those of you who've been here for a while recall when we built the addition on this building and rehabbed this building, we conducted a capital campaign in which we asked the members to make an additional pledge on top of their annual pledge over a period of 3 years to pay for the cost of this project. And the congregation came through spectacularly, and we actually built the addition and did all this work that you see here without taking out a penny other than bridge loans to kind of get us through the project. So we have a history of being successful with that. But such a project is getting going, and we want to try to do this the right way. There's a right way and a wrong way to do these sorts of things, and so we're forming a committee, and we're going to be doing some work about how to do this in the best possible way and the most effective way. But all of you can look forward to hearing more about that. And of course, it will be great to be staying in touch with the various different projects so that we have numbers and specific goals that are clear, so we can communicate that to the congregation. So basically, the bottom line is there will be a capital campaign, and it's actually sort of already going, and you'll be learning more about that. But the best advice I've received about that is to do it the right way, to follow a process and to take certain steps and make sure everybody is on board and get people's opinions and feelings about things, and that's how we're going to proceed. The committee at this point is kind of like a tiny little band of people, myself, Helen Blatz, and Elliot Kelly have agreed to help. And anyone else who would like to volunteer, that would be great. You know where to find me, I hope, or could find out where to find me. Okay, that's great. And again, I don't want to make this confusing, but if people anticipate supporting a program like this, anticipate that they'll be willing to make a contribution to a capital campaign when that capital campaign actually gets underway, and they want to talk to me about maybe making a small down payment on that could help us with the financing this year. Just want to be, I think it gets confusing. You will be asked to pledge for the operating budget in the winter like usual. So I want to be sure that this is not confused with that. But if people are, looking down the road saying, yes, this sounds like really exciting things and I really want to support this, please let me know, because if you can do a little of it now, you don't have to do all of it or even a huge chunk of it, but if we can get enough people to be, sort of making a down payment on this, then we really have no trouble with this year at all. And that's how we that and our reserves are how we get through this. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So you can see we've got a lot of things going on. There's a lot of balls in the air. They're moving along. We're trying to make sure folks communicate with each other and be responsible. And what impresses me so much about this congregation is the talent and the dedication and the people that just roll up their sleeves and try to figure things out. And when we can't, we go out and get the people that can help us figure things out. So these are happening right now. Nothing will happen until we bring it back to the congregation, but we wanted you to know where we're at with these various projects, and of course, the siding that's going to be finished soon. One final announcement. The Leadership Development Committee asked me to remind you that we have cottage meetings coming up. Cottage meetings are an opportunity for you to talk about what you care about the most, what you care about most deeply, to look into your hearts and say, what do you want from a congregation, and what do you want to share with others? And so there'll be 9 either Zoom or in-person cottage meetings coming up in the next month. In Amherst and the surrounding towns, and we hope you would sign up for that. There's an email that went out just recently to give you the link to sign up for those. We hope you would do that. And so thank you for showing up today and on Zoom. We had quite a good crowd on Zoom. I want to extinguish the chalice. And I want to just tell you a short story. The first time, I'm relatively new to this congregation, and I didn't know how things go. And so I was on a Zoom meeting, I forget which one, with her Reverend Rachel and some folks, and she invited me to light the chalice in the beginning, and I said something meaningful and purposeful. I don't know what it was, but it was brilliant. And then at the end, I had another great quote. I had a brilliant quote, and I'm on my desk, and I couldn't find the quote, and I'm panicking because I'm new to the congregation. I really want to participate, And she sees that I'm panicking. I can't find anything. She says, "John, say goodbye, chalice." Goodbye, chalice. And thank you for being here, folks.